My dad smiled at my wedding. He stood near the center of the reception hall, one hand around a glass of wine, the other resting lightly on the microphone like he had been waiting for it all evening. The lights were warm. My husband was beside me. The guests were still seated from dinner, relaxed, expecting something sentimental. My father cleared his throat. He said he was proud of me. He said he always knew I would land somewhere stable. People chuckled softly. Then he glanced at my husband and added, "Marriage is safer than ambition. At least this way, she won't have to keep chasing that startup idea she'll probably regret." There was light applause. A few people laughed more openly than they meant to. He continued almost casually, "Some risks are fine in your 20s. But eventually you grow up." He handed the microphone back like he had delivered a blessing. No one interrupted him. No one corrected him. I did not react. I did not correct him either. I thanked him for speaking. Inside, something rearranged itself. That's when I understood something had shifted. I had spent years learning how to stay composed in rooms like that. If you've ever been useful but not respected, you understand the quiet calculation that happens behind your face. You learn which reactions cost you more than they give back. If this story feels familiar to you, stay with me. Have you ever noticed how the person who fixes everything is rarely the one people take seriously? I did not leave my wedding angry. I left with clarity. In my family, roles were assigned early and never reviewed. My older cousin was brilliant. My younger brother was sensitive. My mother was the emotional center. My father was the authority. I was the reasonable one. That word sounds neutral, but it isn't. Reasonable means dependable. It means you won't argue. It means you will absorb tension, so others do not have to. When I was 12, my father forgot to submit a tax form for his small manufacturing business. I stayed up with him at the dining table, entering numbers into a spreadsheet while he paced and blamed the accountant. I did not complain. I finished the entries. He told the accountant I had helped a little. When I was 15, my brother crashed the car. I was the one who drafted the email to the insurance company because I wrote clearly. My father sent it from his account. The response came addressed to him. He read it out loud at dinner like he had negotiated something complex. When I was 19 and studying engineering, I redesigned the inventory tracking system for his factory as part of a class project. It reduced waste by almost 8%. He introduced it to his managers as an upgrade he had been considering. I was always present, always helpful, never central. Authority in our house flowed in one direction. My father spoke. The rest of us adjusted. He believed leadership meant projection. He valued decisiveness, even when it was wrong. I valued documentation. But documentation is quiet. It does not impress people at dinner tables. By the time I was 24 and building my own software startup, my role had not changed. I was still trying something. Still young. Still in a phase. They tolerated my ambition because it did not threaten them yet. They assumed it would fade. While I was building my company, I still helped my father occasionally. I reviewed vendor contracts when he felt unsure. I digitized older purchase orders so he could access them more easily. I set up secure backups for factory data after a minor ransomware scare. I organized compliance documents because the regulatory deadlines kept shifting. I told myself I was helping. He told others I was good with computers. When he struggled with an overseas supplier dispute, I drafted a structured response outlining delivery failures and payment clauses. He sent it under his name. The supplier adjusted terms within a week. I did not correct the impression. Access requires proximity. Proximity requires usefulness. The factory's financial summaries were emailed to me for formatting. The company registration details were stored in a shared drive I maintained. Password resets came through my phone because I had set up two-factor authentication when they did not understand it. None of this felt like control. It felt like maintenance. But maintenance builds maps. And maps show you where the structure is weakest. People often ask why I did not defend myself at the wedding. The answer is simple. Reacting would have confirmed his narrative. If I had corrected him publicly, it would have looked like immaturity. If I had argued, it would have proved I was still chasing something unstable. Silence preserved access. Compliance maintained proximity. Arrogance makes people sloppy. I did not need applause in that moment. I needed information. My startup was already moving into its second funding round. We had secured pilot contracts with two mid-sized logistics firms. Revenue projections were conservative, but stable. He did not know the numbers. He assumed I would return to the factory eventually. That assumption gave me time. The second humiliation came 3 months later. My company had just been featured in a regional business magazine. It was not front-page national coverage yet, but it was visible. Investors had begun requesting meetings. That week, my parents hosted a dinner for extended family. I arrived after a long call with a potential partner. My father greeted me at the door and said, loudly enough for others to hear, "Our entrepreneur is here." Still playing CEO. I smiled. During dessert, my aunt asked how the company was doing. Before I could answer, my father said, "It's a learning experience. Luckily, she has this marriage to fall back on." There was polite laughter. Then he turned to me and said, "Actually, since you understand contracts, can you look at a transfer agreement for the factory? We're restructuring ownership. It's time you contributed properly." The room quieted slightly. He handed me a folder. The document proposed shifting partial ownership shares into a consolidated holding structure under his direct management. It included a clause requesting my signature as a technical director for compliance purposes. He assumed I would sign after reviewing. He assumed my role remained supportive. I said I would look at it carefully and send feedback. He nodded, satisfied. They didn't realize what they had just handed me. Over the next 6 months, I did not argue. I documented. I created a labeled folder on my encrypted drive titled Factory Structure. Inside it, I placed scanned copies of incorporation papers, board resolutions, supplier contracts, and shareholder agreements dating back 12 years. I cross-checked signatures against digital timestamps. I archived email threads where responsibilities had been delegated informally but never formalized. I compared the proposed transfer agreement to the original partnership deed, noting inconsistencies in voting rights distribution. There were gaps. The factory had expanded quickly, but its governance had not matured. Several compliance filings listed me as technical operations consultant because I had completed them on his behalf during audits. In 2 instances, I was named as interim data protection officer. Those titles carried liability. They also carried leverage. I printed hard copies of key clauses and stored them in a thin gray binder. I highlighted sections related to director consent requirements. I marked deadlines for regulatory updates that had been postponed. Simultaneously, my startup closed its second funding round. We onboarded 3 enterprise clients. Our software reduced fuel waste for logistics fleets by measurable margins. A national publication requested an interview. I kept those developments separate from the factory documentation. Preparation replaces reaction. By the time the headline appeared, a short feature titled, "Young Founder Optimizes Regional Supply Chains," my father sent a brief message. "Good coverage. Proud of you." He did not mention the wedding speech. 2 days later, another message arrived. "Family dinner Sunday?" I knew what that meant. Within 2 weeks, formal notices were drafted. I did not send them personally. Our external compliance consultant, hired months earlier under my startup's legal budget, submitted clarification requests to the factory's regulatory authority regarding outdated director designations and unreported structural changes. Simultaneously, I declined to sign the transfer agreement pending rectification of discrepancies. I attached annotated references to specific clauses from the original partnership deed requiring unanimous consent for authority consolidation. My name appeared repeatedly across filings as responsible technical officer. Without my written approval, the restructuring could not proceed cleanly. Additionally, certain digital system credentials remained under 2-factor authentication tied to my device, established during the ransomware incident years earlier. I did not revoke access. I simply required formal documentation before any modification. Power shifted in paperwork. Silently. The first official letter arrived on a Tuesday. It requested updated director disclosures within 14 days. My father called me that evening, confused. "Why is the regulator asking about this now?" I said calmly that external audits sometimes triggered reviews. The second notice concerned data compliance certifications tied to digital systems registered under my oversight. An internal bank alert followed, temporarily pausing a credit extension until governance documentation aligned with current filings. No accounts were seized. Nothing dramatic happened. Processes simply slowed. Suppliers began requesting written confirmation of authority before approving revised contracts. One overseas partner postponed a shipment pending clarification of signatory rights. My father grew impatient. At another family dinner, his tone sharpened slightly. "Can you just fix this?" I replied that everything required formal resolution. The documentation had to match reality. He accused the consultant of overcomplicating matters. I suggested meeting with the consultant directly. During that meeting, held in a neutral office downtown, the consultant outlined discrepancies in measured language. He referenced clause numbers. He explained liability exposure. My father listened. He realized that without my signature, clean, informed, and voluntary consolidation risked regulatory penalties. He also realized that prior filings naming me as technical officer had legal weight. He had assumed those were symbolic. They were not. Over the next month, corrective amendments were filed. Voting rights were redistributed according to original agreements. My role was formally clarified, limiting liability. Certain operational controls were diversified rather than centralized. Control did not disappear from him entirely. It simply could not be singular. At home, conversations became shorter. The factory stabilized. My startup expanded. The national headlines circulated widely. His name remained absent. Justice unfolded procedurally. After the final amendment was accepted, I visited the factory one last time. The machines were louder than I remembered. Employees nodded politely. I walked into the small office where I had once entered tax numbers at 12 years old. On the desk sat a spare access key I had kept for emergencies. I placed it in the center of the table. I left behind a printed summary of my updated role. Advisory only, no operational liability. No speeches. No confrontation. My father stood near the doorway but did not block it. I said I would focus fully on my company moving forward. He nodded once. I stepped outside, closed the gate gently, and did not look back. People assume justice feels loud. It does not. It feels administrative. The wedding speech no longer echoes in my head. Not because I forgot it, but because it became data. It showed me how I was perceived. It revealed the gap between contribution and recognition. I did not correct the perception with words. I corrected the structure that allowed it. Self-respect is not a declaration. It is alignment between responsibility and authority. For years, I accepted responsibility without authority because it kept peace. I believed usefulness was enough. It is not. Clarity changed my posture, not my tone. I no longer enter rooms to be acknowledged. I enter them to understand systems. My father still hosts dinners. He speaks carefully now when referencing my work. There is less projection. More caution. We are civil. Distance can be polite. When he texted family dinner, after the national headline, I went. I brought the terms. He signed them. The wine was not the only thing he could not finish. Nothing exploded. Nothing needed to. Some shifts are permanent precisely because they are quiet. I did not win. I adjusted the structure. And once you see the structure clearly, you cannot unsee it. That clarity is irreversible.